Hello and welcome. My name is Dawson Church, and I am so delighted to be sharing this time with you today. I also have a long-time and precious friend here with me, Richard Gordon. He is the developer of Quantum Touch. He is author of several books, including Quantum Touch and also The Secret Nature of Matter, and the developer of Self-Created Health. However, truly, he's a magician. And we'll feel the magic and see what he does, as well as understand more of how he sees people, energy, psychology, shifting, healing, time and space today. Richard, thank you so much for being here.
Dawson, what a pleasure to see you again after all this time.
I know, it's a joy. And I was saying before we began to record how just tuning into each other's energy has been so wonderful for me today. And all those times you spent together and the quality of experience has been high. And so here we're contemplating the kind of fear and anxiety that we witness as we look at people who are experiencing and living through all the challenges in the world today. And the media, of course, brings people daily bad news. There is the very short news cycle, 2 hours, 4 hours, 24 hours, bringing often yet more developments, driving us deeper into fear. And so the real question for people like you and me is, what can we share with people, and what is the way that in these crises you deal with all that fear, all that anxiety?
Well, these are really big questions, and people are hurting right now. They're hurting a lot. They're hurting emotionally. They're worried about their finances and everything else, the health of their loved ones and the well-being. And this tends to put people in a sense of overwhelm and a lot of pain. So we really need to turn this around and use our power. So do you remember the movie Apollo 13? Where it looks like they're going to lose the astronauts? Well, in that movie, there was a phrase, the head director of NASA was saying, no, this is going to be our finest hour. That is a determination to be powerful. And before we talk about everything else, I think the first thing is we need to make the decision. We need to have a determination to be powerful, a determination that we're going to use this crisis to make this our finest hour. Because it's so easy to feel overwhelmed, to feel that this is unfair, to feel victimized by the situation, and we truly are. But that's not helpful. So we need to gather our power together and choose that we're going to use this as an opportunity to become powerful. And that would be step one.
Okay, and so as you yourself are working with these challenges, what do you do to remind yourself of your own power?
Well, the first thing is to realize that we always have choices. No matter what happens, we always have a choice in the matter. We can always make new decisions. Excuse me. So in terms of making choices, one of the first things to do is to realize that stress and fear, that stress is not just stress. Stress is a generalization for a lot of specific emotions. So if you're worried about somebody's health, for example, and you're worried about money, well, as a real common theme right now, this is not stress. These are specific emotions. I'm fearful. I'm angry this thing could happen. I feel sad that somebody is sick. So you cannot release stress. You can relax, but that's not the release of stress because the stress is still there. You need to turn it into the specific emotions that it actually is. So I'm angry this person is sick, or I'm angry I can't go to work and make my living. I'm angry I can't pay my mortgage, or whatever the emotions are. You need to turn the stress into the specific emotions and then do what you can to release those emotions. So that is very empowering, because if we don't allow ourselves to first acknowledge the emotional reality of what's happening, trying to relax in the face of intense emotions is putting a Band-Aid on a boil. It's not really dealing with the issue.
And then when you do allow yourself to feel the emotions, to label the emotions, to get below that general picture of stress to the
Yeah.
actual emotions that underlie it and the circumstances which appear superficially to be creating the emotions, when
Yes.
you're at that level of feeling, what's the next step?
Well, the next step is to spend the emotion. See, when you have money and you're holding the money, you put it on the counter and you spend it. They take the emotion, they take the money away, and now you have spent the emotion. In terms of releasing emotion, it's very important that a person has the strong intention of spending the emotion, of experiencing it so fully and completely that they're not holding on to it anymore. We teach this in a class where people use this to improve their health. We call it self-created health, where they release the intensity of all the old emotions, and then the condition can spontaneously transform. So by identifying what emotions, the hurt, the anger, the guilt, the shame, the fears, whatever the core emotions are, to intensely experience them, express them, move them through your body, try to get them through your system. It can never be done perfectly, but you do your best. Then afterwards, then you can do relaxation techniques. And I like to do something where I then say, all right, if the worst happens, I need to create a plan B and, heaven forbid, a plan C. Not that I ever want to use these plans. I would write out the plan in great detail. You just write the whole thing out. I would do this, I would do this. I'd hate that, but I would do these things. Once you have plan B and plan C written out, then you can put them in a drawer and probably never have to go there. But it releases the tension and the fear and the distress of not having a plan. Once you know you have that plan, okay, then you can move beyond it. But it's a very powerful way of putting yourself into a stronger position by knowing that you'd be okay no matter what. Yeah, I could lose the house, I could be homeless or whatever, but I'm going to be okay no matter what happens. That is taking back your power. Now, that releases the emotional stress and struggle that you're carrying at that vibration. And that gives you space to attract and create miracles. And I had an extraordinary miracle happen a couple of weeks ago, because I had to do this process myself. And I used another process, a little bit of what some people call programming or reality creation, or other people call magic. And I attracted a huge amount of money out of the blue, completely ridiculous. But that's what happens after you release the intensity of the emotions. And I can give you a technique on how to do that too later on. But you release the intensity. You then create alternative plans. From the alternative plans, you can create a sense of real deep well-being with that determination to be powerful. So that's the generalization of where we're going with all this.
I so like that, because I really respect the teachers who talk about the power of positive thinking, staying positive, visualizing, having a vision board, affirmations, and so on. And yet what I found in my own life, Richard, was I was doing that 30, 40 years ago, and it wasn't
Yes,
working. And what I
of course
realized
not.
was that I was not doing what you're advocating now. I wasn't allowing myself to feel the emotions. As they came up, I was scared of them. I tried to avoid them. And so I was trying to avoid the dark by going straight to the light side and thinking that that would somehow save me from ever having to experience or process the dark side. But now we have 30 plus years of psychological trauma research showing that you absolutely have to go in there and feel. If you dissociate, if you try and move to that higher level without dealing with those things, with that plan A, B, and C, with writing those things down, with feeling those emotions in your body, if you try and transcend, it
Yeah.
just doesn't work. And that then becomes the festering dark side, which rises up out of the consciousness and subconscious to intrude and often produce really bad effects in your life.
This is very well stated, and it's just like some religious people who try to remove sex from their thoughts completely, and then when they have a conference at the hotel, everyone is renting a porno movie because they're expressing that. And so when you bury emotions, you bury them alive. They're still there. And the most destructive emotion is also the most healing emotion, and that's anger. If you bury the anger, it will cause health issues, relationship issues, or financial issues, or some combination thereof. And it was interesting, a man came over a few months ago, and I usually work with people on health issues, but he had a financial crisis that was so severe. And when I wrote down, I have a way of tracking and finding emotional cause. So we looked at the emotional cause of this financial issue. And the issue was so profound. And we tracked it back in time, and it related to 2 other financial crises that he had had. But we took that further back in time. The financial issue was so painful for him, it was an exact mirror, to the letter, of how he felt as a 5-year-old when his drunk father would come into the room, beat up his mother, and then beat him up. That's how bad his financial issue felt to him. Was that painful of being the 5-year-old, knowing he's going to get beaten up after seeing his mom get beaten up. We recreate, when the anger is stored in the body, we magically recreate these experiences over and over again. They do not happen in a vacuum. Now, we actually create our reality. Now, a lot of people have been saying that, and they're very glib about the way they do it. I'm not glib about this at all, because we have a method for finding the exact emotional cause of health conditions, and it fits like a glove. All 40 of the things they said about the health condition is a perfect mirror of emotions they didn't want to feel on an emotional situation. It's a perfect match. So this stuff that's happening to us is not out of a vacuum. It's very concise. And only, as you said, when we completely experience those emotions, can we move beyond them. And so the anger is actually the most healing emotion, or the most destructive emotion. And when it's suppressed, oppressed, depressed, repressed, when you hold the anger inside, it'll destroy your body, relationships, and finance, or whatever combination you're working with in that regard. However, when you express in a self-actualized way and release that anger and move beyond it, then we can open the space for miracles.
I love that way you put that, because that self-actualized way, and then you're experiencing it, that self-actualization is providing a frame through which you're experiencing it. So you aren't just giving into your anger, you aren't just re-experiencing or reliving old anger, you're then inviting that emotion into that frame of self-actualization, which is profoundly transformative. And then you talked about moving through these cycles and then looking back on them at the end. And you mentioned to me earlier how you've had clients who look back on whether it's a health challenge or a financial challenge or a healing crisis of one kind or another, a life crisis, and then they perceive things very differently at the other end. Please share with us what that end result of this process of looking
Yeah.
at the crises through that lens of self-actualization is like.
Yeah, the body has the ability to express the emotions in a perfect mirror. And so, for instance, one woman, I attended my workshop, and she almost needed to be in a wheelchair. She was so feeble. But she had so much rage and anger and hurt of people who had damaged her in her life. And she processed the emotions. And she started attending more of my workshops around the world. And she told me her story. And the story was, after that workshop, and she released all this intense emotion, she ran up a mountain. It's like, just the power of taking back your power. But we live in a society where the biggest human blockage is the fear of the intensity of our emotions. So we don't have any good models in the movies of how to honestly, vulnerably release the intensity of the anger. And in many cases, you cannot do it with another person. You need to do it privately and internally because the other people aren't ready for that. The movies, we see redemption through violence. We see lots of bad models. Slam the door and walk out of the room, or punish the person, or be mean, or slap them, or hit them in the head, or shoot them. This is how we normally see anger being expressed. But the vulnerable expression of anger is very vulnerable, because underneath that anger is a tremendous well of hurt. And for those who dive into their hurt and don't like to feel their anger, it's a family thing. The family didn't know how to express the anger in a healthy manner, so we don't feel it's safe to experience our own honesty and integrity and responsibility and trust, the core pillars of internally based self-esteem, which is to have that core honesty, to have the integrity to have that honesty, to be responsible to have that honesty, and to trust yourself, to have the intensity of your real emotions. When you're able to be real with yourself, that's when you build internally based self-esteem and self-love, which cannot be taken away by other people, because it comes from an internal source, not the accumulation of property or fame or beauty or whatever it is that people use as a substitute for internally based, which is external validation for self-esteem. So people need to go internally to access it.
Then, of course, when you are going internally to access it and finding the source of that self-esteem and self-love inside yourself, then you don't need external validation from somebody else, and you are your own source and your own supply. I'd like to talk briefly now about the work we both do, which of course is energy therapies. And with quantum touch, you've had these remarkable discoveries, a whole series of them. What I so enjoy about your work as well is that as you develop quantum touch, then quantum touch 2, and then the other work you've done, you keep on making discoveries. You keep on finding new ways of making this ever faster, ever more efficient. And so what I would love to have us talk about for a few moments here is energy therapies, how energy can be transformative, and especially addressing materialists. So many people are materialists. They say, well, look, this is a real problem out there. There is really a financial crash. Look over here, I've lost my job. Look, I'm having this genuine problem with my teenagers, or my parents are having cognitive issues as they get older. Or look at the problem in my marriage, or I have this disease, I have this virus, I have this genetic condition. And so we tend to think of our problems, our emotional problems, as being caused externally as a result of things that happen outside of ourselves. And we then tend to look for solutions at the material level. And so people want a pill, want a surgery, want some
Right.
kind of external therapy from somebody else. And we really are not in the habit of looking for those answers within, certainly not to changes in energy. But you know, and I know in our books, in our work, we talk about this,
Yeah.
how when you shift your energy, your entire material field changes. I mean, we have studies showing that your brain process changes, your DNA, your gene expression changes, your whole function of your nervous system changes, hormones like DHEA and oxytocin and cortisol, all of these things change purely based on energy. So how do you talk to people who are in the middle of a material crisis, are looking for material suggestions, and are skeptical that energy is their true leverage point?
Well, there's no simple answer that's going to address it all. But what I do is, if a person really wants to know this, I'll sit down with them and I'll do private sessions or teach people how to do this as a group. But I'll help them find exactly what the emotions are that they're not expressing. You see, the body has a perfect ability to mirror suppressed emotions. And this has been hidden from psychology, even though Freud figured it out. He called it conversion, how people convert their emotions into symptoms. But then he made a deal with the devil, I mean, the medical establishment of their time, saying, I won't talk about psychology if you don't talk about medicine. All right, fair enough. So he stopped talking about medicine and would stick only to psychology. And then the psychotherapists, who are very much, as a group, very afraid of their own emotions, try to get people to shift their emotions without having to feel the intensity of what's there. So what I do is I ask people a series of very, very simple interrogative questions. Like, what emotions do you feel because you have the condition, and when did it begin? And simple things that a doctor would probably ask a lot of people. But what I do is I write everything down verbatim, and then we translate it into emotion. And when I've got 40 answers and we track it back to a situation, and all 40 of their replies fit like a perfect glove to describe an emotional situation that they didn't want to experience. And I'll say, I hand them the list and I say, so what do you do with these emotions? And they look at the list and they say, well, they're the ones I never want to feel. And I say, well, maybe you're feeling them as symptoms rather than emotions. Once they have that insight, they're ready for step 2 of the process, and there are 7 steps. The second step is the release of those emotions. The third step is the insight. And the third step is dangerous if they didn't do the first 2 steps, which is the insight and the release. At that point, they get the discovery, oh my God, I hurt myself by doing this. To feel the remorse, then feel this self-forgiveness. And the self-forgiveness turns into explosive and overwhelming self-love, uncontainable self-love. And that's the end of the process. So we turn the deepest physical or emotional suffering into the most overwhelming level of self-love. But you can't get there from here. You've got to go through the fire. It's just like you were saying a moment ago. You have to be willing to experience the intensity. You can't cover it up with an affirmation. There's some people who say, oh, well, this condition is caused by fear of X, Y, or Z, or anger at a sibling, or whatever the simple answer is. It's not that simple. And then they'll give you an affirmation to use on top of it. But this is emotional, spiritual and emotional bypass therapy, where you want to bypass the problem and then put the sugarcoating affirmation on top. It doesn't work that way. And it really comes down to the willingness to be emotionally honest and vulnerable with ourselves. And that's how we can take our self-love and our power back. And from that position, then the energy work that I use with quantum touch, where we're using breathing and body awareness to raise what the Chinese call qi and the yogis call prana, that life force energy that's within us. We can focus and amplify that energy and project it. Now we see rapid accelerated healing on a wide range of conditions from that. But I would say in the kind of situation people are in now, we really need to have a deeper level of emotional release and healing. And then the energy works great on top of that. But I would not say that was the first solution, is just to use energy. I would say we need to have that level of self-empowerment through honesty and integrity, responsibility, and trust.
Yes, absolutely. And when you do that, you then can move through it, move beyond it. And then one of the things that you have stressed is that it's possible then to look back on those crises, whether they're huge social crises, whether they're financial crises, whether they're personal health crises, with a very different perspective on them than when you're enmeshed in them. Talk for a moment as we close about this whole idea of looking back and then seeing these crises in a very different light.
Yeah, it's what I've come to term dark miracle. It's never a miracle when it happens. It's always a tragedy. It always feels terrible. But when you have healed it and you get to the other side, then you realize it was a perfect manifestation, a miraculous manifestation. The spider bite that got infected that reminded you of all these emotions, and everything about it was a perfect mirror of something you didn't want to feel. Only in retrospect do you realize how perfectly orchestrated the disaster was, and it became a dark miracle and a source of tremendous growth and healing for you and transformation. The miracles are there, but we can't see them when we're mired and buried in the pain and the self-pity.
I love that phrase, dark miracles. And then that also makes you far more willing to breathe, slow down, be at peace, and accept what's going on around you, rather than trying to get away from it, trying to fix it. And so knowing that in time, knowing as you look back that yes, it was dark, and it was that impulse that gave you the momentum for transformation, is a really powerful thing to be aware of. So when you're enmeshed in it, it might be very hard to see that. But I'm just convinced that as we look back, not only on our personal health challenges, but even on huge social, political, financial, seeming disasters, we look back and we'll say, oh, that's when humankind became more compassionate. That's when humankind realized its resourcefulness. That's when humankind realized how interconnected we all are. That's when humankind reevaluated its core values and what's important in society. And so even though in the middle of the crisis, it's very difficult to have that kind of meta perspective on things, knowing that if you look back on your own life, you have had those epiphanies, you have had those very different realizations after your personal problems. I think that globally we're moving through the shift. We will see these things as being the factor that gave us the momentum for massive positive social and moral shift as well in time. So even though it's hard to see it now, it's definitely in the bigger picture the thing that's propelling change.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, you got to the next point that I wanted to bring up, which is that this is the classic story. We've seen it with so many famous people, and you may likely have seen it within yourself, that look at the worst suffering you ever had. If you came out on top at some point in the future, how you would never have become the person you are today without that thing you had to push against. So we see it in all the heroic stories. No one's the hero if they hadn't overcome some really horrible challenge. And this becomes your own personal mythology of victory. And it becomes your own personal dark miracle. But you can never see it as a miracle until you're all the way on the other side. And when you are on the other side, you realize it was perfectly set up for you. It wasn't an arbitrary piece of darkness or tragedy. It was specifically aligned for your own growth. And then when you realize that, then it opens up a whole door of realizing how extraordinary the universe is working.
Richard, to end with, let's just do what you and I did off camera to begin with, which is just be in our hearts, be in our connected energy space. And I'd like just to invoke all the people who will watch this, all the
Yes.
people who have watched this, all the people who will watch this in the future, and seeing ourselves as part of this huge community of love, of well-being and healing. And if we just imaginally now, in our imagination, put ourselves in that positive future that we know we'll break through to in time, and
Yes.
create that frame you were talking about of transcendence as a lens through which to see the crisis we might feel ourselves in right now. I think that that would be a perfect place to end. So
Perfect.
you and I can do this. We'll invite everyone else to be in this space. You and I will hold this space with each other together. And then any words you'd like to say, anything that you'd like to verbalize to invoke that space, just go ahead, as together we all share that sense of completion and sense that this
Beautiful.
was the crisis that resulted in a rebirth.
Yeah, I have nothing to add. So just put yourself in that space and feel what it would be like if you were on the other side of this, and feeling empowered by the crisis and healed by the crisis, and have become more as a result of the crisis. And I'm going to send energy to that vision of all of you being on the other side, as well as myself and all of my loved ones.
And with the breath, just feel the energy we're sending now, feel the energy we have as a collective body, feel the energy that goes beyond time and space to nurture us and restore us and bring vibrance and life to our bodies. And so as we breathe together now, sensing this very real energy, we put ourselves together and eternally in that transcendent place with our next few breaths. Richard, with our final three breaths, I'd love for you to just guide us in something you taught me more than 10 years ago, which is that we can intensify the energy deliberately. And I always thought that the energy was just the energy and was the way it was. And you said, no, it's your energy. You can play with it, double it in strength. And I was like, really?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. What we can do, you want me to do that right now?
Please do.
Okay. What we can do is put your awareness inside your body and see if you can feel sensations in your body. Breathe into your body. See if you can feel your feet, your legs, without touching them. See if you can focus on any part of your body with your breath and your self-awareness, and amplify that self-awareness inside your body. See if you can create a sense of tingling or vibration or heat or just any kind of sensation inside your body. And as you do this, take deeper breaths and see if you can move the sensation in waves through your body with your breath and amplify it. Now bring your awareness into your heart chakra in your chest, and feel how much you love. Think about people that you love. Think about a cat or a dog. Anything that brings that sense of love, and feel the sensation in your heart chakra, the whole heart center, and feel it expand and move through your whole body. Amplify it with intention and breath. And this is kind of like a micro taste of what we do with quantum touch. We move the energy so powerfully through ourselves that we can then amplify it and then allow the other person to match our vibration so their own self-healing process is accelerated. And that's how we do it. So these exercises are the foundation of how we build energy inside ourselves and then how we give it to another person to accelerate their own self-healing mechanisms in their body. We don't actually heal them. We give energy so that they can more effectively heal themselves.
I just love tuning into this universal energy field and knowing it's not just us here at the level of our human consciousness, but that as we do this, we participate in the consciousness of the universe itself, and we can bring that then into the receptacle of our local minds and local experience and tap into that universal chi that you referred to, Richard, and be part of that wonderful energy, being, and creation that we're in the midst of all the time. Thank you so much, my brother, for
What a
sharing your
pleasure.
heart and brilliance.
Dawson, it's always such a treat to see you and to share with you. And I love our synergy together because we're just continuing to uplift ourselves and each other.
I feel as I put my head next to yours and we would just be one mind.
We're brothers from another mother.
So let this blessing just radiate out to everyone watching this, past, present, and future. Thank you so much for your attention. Make sure you experience the exercise that accompanies this interview and allow all of the richness, all of the empowerment that flows from taking this approach fully into your life, regardless of the challenges you face now and in the future. Thank you so much.